would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Exploring the Artificial Intelligence in Education. My name is Ola Andre Lindgren, and I'm working as a pedagogical advisor at It's Learning. My journey starting actually as a nurse, but later as a teacher, and now I'm working with educational technology at It's Learning. And my role here is basically training people, talking about educational research, and a little bit about helping how people are using both It's Learning but also other EdTech. And that is it about me. I would just like to remind everyone that there is a question tab up in your corner, and if you want to ask our panelists questions, there will be a Q&A in the end, but if you write them in the question tabs, we can look at them afterwards and see what we're answering. Our discussion today will move from pretty broad questions about AI development to practical classroom implementation. We'll try to explore how these tools can benefit all our students while addressing concerns around bias, fairness, and appropriate governance. And since these words we're using can have slightly different meanings for different people, I've also made a small definition of some of the words we will be using today. And that is because we have seen in earlier discussions and webinars and things like that, that not all people understand words the same way, and especially in a different language. So our first definition today will be about what is AI. And that is a huge question, and we won't even start to scratch the surface of it. But when we're talking about AI in this setting, we are usually talking about large language models that aren't proper AIs as such. A large language model are basically predictability machines. They are not actually thinking individuals, even though their creators want us to think that these days. They're getting friendlier, they are maybe using emoticons, all that. But when you're asking a question or asking an LLM to do something, what it actually does is predict what word should come next, depending on its training material. And they're really good at predicting it. So it will often seem like you're talking to someone who is thinking, and especially now when you can sort of see the reasoning behind the scenes, it's really easy to be dragged in and it'll be like, wow, this is AI. It's thinking, it's working. But that is sadly not, or perhaps good, not the case yet. So they are predictive, they are not thinking, but they are very good at predicting. And if it hits something that it's not sure about, it will probably make something up. And that is the things that we are sometimes referring to as hallucinations. That means they won't lie to you as such, because that would take conscious thought, but they will pretend to know what they're talking about with great confidence. So that's an AI, or large language model. Bias, we are talking a little bit about today in AI, refers to when the system products have a bias, like they will reflect something that is present in their training data. An example of that would be if you want them to create a picture of a doctor, you will probably get a man, because historically doctors were men and the pictures were of men, so we trained on that. If you ask for a nurse, it would probably be a woman. Again, as far as we know, these aren't programmed in on purpose, but they will reflect what they are trained on. So there could also be different biases depending on what question you ask and what language you ask in, because the different languages might have different biases. So that's a bias. And third and not least, we're using the E word, equity. And equity is one of those words that have been up quite a lot lately because, well, not everyone knows exactly what it is, and it's sort of become a part of this DEI shortening. Equity in an educational context means that we should ensure a fair access a fair treatment and a fair outcome for all the students, regardless of their background, abilities, or circumstances. And importantly, equity is different from equality, where everyone gets the same thing. Equity should be aimed at you, for you, and for what you need. So if you are, for instance, a student with dyslexia, you might need text-to-speech technology to understand your school. That wouldn't give you an advantage, but it would give you equal footing. And that is the key in equity. And so now I would love to introduce our panelists. They are really, really smart people. And I hope that they will talk more or less non-stop without me. And I would like to start with Björn Erik Thon. Could you please say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for your introduction, Ole. My name is, as you can read on the screen, Björn Erik Thon, and Ole said a little about where he started his journey. My journey started as a lawyer, which might sound a bit strange, ending up to discuss artificial intelligence. But these days, everyone is discussing artificial intelligence, even though I have to admit that I don't feel always very smart, as you mentioned in your introduction, when we are discussing this. But my job is, I'm the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Ombud. Before I entered into this position 3 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago, I was the Data Protection Commissioner, which was the director in the Datatilsynet, Data Protection Authority in Norway for almost 12 years. So I have been working with security issues, data protection issues, and for the last 3 years, equality and discrimination in terms of artificial intelligence. So I have sort of a mixed background, to put it that way, when we talk about artificial intelligence, but I will mainly focus on the things I'm doing today as an equality and anti-discrimination person. I don't know, well, if you want me to say a little bit about our main focus areas in this area now, or we'll come back to that later, or what do you prefer?
Yeah, we can come back to that a little bit.
Yeah. So just a few keywords about us. It's we are, of course, promote equality, of course, to recognize the risk of discrimination and to increase the risk of discrimination. And of course, to fight bias. You mentioned the example with the doctors and the nurse. I have a couple of more examples I would like to share with you later. But I think that's an okay introduction about me and very, very briefly about our work. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Björn Erik. Ida, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, hi everybody. My name is Ida. My background is I'm an educated teacher. I have a master's degree in ICT supported learning, and it's always been the possibilities of using technology in the classroom that's kind of just intrigued me. So I think that's just my life's mission, to figure out how that looks in the best possible way. And also how it looks when technology is not the tool that we're supposed to use. I am the founder of Nedi, a company that is developing technology that helps students succeed by making learning more personalized. I do believe that is the future. AI is one of the technologies that will help make this happen. And I am also a board member of a foundation called Girl Tech Norway, which works towards a more diverse, more diversity within technology. We need people of all shapes and sizes, of all genders and gender identities, and that's what I do on my spare time. So I'm looking forward to the talk today and hope to learn some new things as well.
Last but not least, Arnfinn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ole. My name is Arnfinn Redse, and I am a teacher in music, mathematics, and religious studies. But the past decade, I've been working I've been working with onboarding and in a number of different roles in a leading math learning provider software company in Norway, Kikora AS. I left them last year, and now I work as a consultant within digitalization and compliance and privacy in the Association of Christian Free Schools in Norway. And last fall, I co-founded a network for artificial intelligence in schools with a few other key players in school technology landscape in Norway. So that's my background and interest.
Thank you so much, all of you. Like I mentioned in our introduction, today's talk is about AI, and it is about the bias and how we can work against getting it fair and appropriate governance of AI. We are seeing a lot of different ways of working with AI around in Norway and around in Europe, and we can see that different places are doing different things. Some places we are having fairly strict governance rules. Other places it's more or less a free-for-all these days. But we are going to start broadly here, and we're going to try to narrow it down through 4 topics. And our first topic is around systemic bias and the big tech influence. And we're starting to begin to look at this big picture where the concentration of AI development so far is in a handful of major technological companies, primarily based in Western countries, and almost all of them are in the US these days. So the main question right now is, how does the concentration of AI development in a few major companies challenge educational values? And what risk does this pose in terms of bias, equity, and democratic oversight? And who would like to start that mouthful? I would just like to say we did send out the topics beforehand, so people are completely unprepared for these questions. John Eric, you seem like you would like to start.
Yeah. So I can start it out. This is an important question, and probably, the big tech influence. The issue of big tech influence is important to all the issues we are going to discuss today. So it's a starting point, I think, for every discussion. Because if we look back 20 years to 2005, the most influential, the richest and most powerful companies in the world were oil and gas and energy. Today, it's, I think, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, it's the big tech companies. And they're often, and you also refer to the American companies, I agree with you, the American companies, they are in our face every day, right? But we must not forget about the Chinese companies, because talking about AI, Chinese companies are maybe on the way to take the lead. My prediction is as good as anyone's there, or as bad as anyone's, but you have to keep that in mind. But the dominance of a few companies, mainly Americans, to simplify it a little, is huge. And AI and algorithms are, for the normal person, impossible to understand. So we have to put a lot of trust in these companies. But the way I see it, they are not necessarily to be trusted. Looking, for instance, at Meta, and the history of Meta, Facebook, it's not a very proud history when it comes to bias, transparency, monitoring discussions, and so on and so forth. These companies, they create sort of echo chambers. I used to be a politician many years ago in the...
Bjørn Erik fell out there for a while. Let's hope he can get back in quickly.
Yeah, I can continue.
That would be awesome, Ida.
Yep.
Yeah, of course. So I think my main issue, I like the fact that you ask, why is it a challenge? It's not is it a challenge, but why is it a challenge? And I think that first and foremost is because no big tech company today that has presence in education has created their tools to support the classroom and learning. It is not something that is developed to support teachers. It's not developed to support learning as a process. It is something that is designed for completely other purposes, but has been adapted into the classroom, either because teachers are wonderfully creative people that find tools that are very close to what students use at home and implement that in the classroom to bridge the gap between education and the rest of the students' lives, or because the big tech companies actively sell their products to the schools. And the main motivation when they sell to the schools is not learning at that point either. So when Bjørn Erik talks about trust, I think that is totally valid, because they're selling something to the schools that is not an educational tool in the beginning. It creates value in the classroom because the teacher makes it so with a good learning design. So I think when it comes to their presence, I think that is something that we need to be very conscious about, that this is just a tool we adapt to the context, and it's not something that is created for the context.
If I may say something as well, I think it would be useful to zoom out a little bit back to what an AI is. So an AI, or a large language model, because a large language model has no personal, it has no control over itself. It's defined by mainly, this is a simplification, but it's a useful simplification to understand how the large language model works. So like you said in the beginning, Ole, a large language model is a statistical machine that tries to predict what a useful answer to whatever prompt you give it would be based on its training data. But there's another level. So it has the data that you put in, but then it has another another level of guardrails. And you can think of them as system prompts that are there underneath before the user gets to interact with the large language model. And the reason for having system prompts is that in all the training data, which in these massive models is, it's somewhat controlled what they put in, but they also scrape the internet. And there are some really dark things on the internet, but also the internet is like an amalgam of the history of mankind. And so it's biased for historical reasons, not because anyone necessarily intends it to be. So like your example, because most doctors in the history of the earth used to be men, then statistically, when it tries to aggregate a picture of a doctor, it will be a man, because that's just the average doctor is a man, and the average nurse is a woman. But there are 100 other things that you could want guardrails against, like what percentage of the internet has something racist in it. Maybe this is just speculation, of course, but just maybe 30%. Okay, so 30% of the answers from the LLM statistically should be racist, but you don't want that. So you put system prompts on top that are guardrails, but this inserts another problem, because one thing is, what is the average values or the average opinions of the data. That's like one layer. But then the other layer is what guardrails do we put in place and why? And so who gets to decide what the guardrails are? And what values do they have? And when this is a big tech company in the United States, they might have completely different opinions on the values in the society than, for example, we would have in Scandinavia. Although we're Western countries, in the long history, we are based in Christian values and the last 200 years with the Enlightenment. And then after the World War II, we have the United Nations Charter and the Charter of Human Rights. So there's obviously a lot of things that we agree on, but as we unfortunately see across the ocean at the moment, things can turn very quickly, and the large tech companies seem to follow the political winds, so to speak, very quickly. And this might change a lot in what values the large language models support. You can see the exact same example from China, where if you ask DeepSeek about Taiwan or Muslim Uyghurs in labor camps in China, it will just plain refuse to talk about it. And so this has a big impact or a big potential to have a big impact in our working with large language models in schools, because part of schooling is also the Bildung of the child, the development of a whole child with values that are compatible with our society. Of course, you don't want to brainwash everyone to have the same opinion, but like broadly, you want people to be on the same playing field at least. And so this poses a lot of big questions when we have no control of the value systems of the LLMs.
And I want to add.
Yeah, Ida, you can add.
Yeah, I want to add that. So not only can we can't control it, but it's not transparent either. I have one example for later when it comes to what we replace in the classroom when we use the LLMs. But when we traditionally use Google searches, at least Google is upfront about this is something we're paid to put on top. That's why you see it, and this is something by statistically people found interesting, so that's what follows. It was transparent, so with a bit of knowledge, you knew why you saw what you saw on the first page of a Google search. We have no way, not yet at least, to be transparent about what are the, let's call it the value proposal that is underneath the answer we get when we use the different LLMs today. It's just assumptions, and you can make some conclusions by testing them in the way that Arnfinn told us right now.
Can I have a comment, Jan-Erik?
Just to finish my introduction, but I'm sorry I was kicked out. I actually don't know what happened, but sometimes the technology and so on and so forth. But I guess Ida and Arnfinn, they mentioned several very important points that I totally agree in. But I would just finish this story that I started about the history of Facebook and Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, and how they, not that many years ago, ended up in a big scandal where they showed commercials and gave recommendations for slimming products to people with anorexia and similar situations like this, and people with eating disorders. And what is scary is that scandals like this seems to have absolutely no effect on the way they are working. And with the political, as you mentioned, Arnfinn, with the political leadership we have in the United States today, they have totally shifted and become less. They used to be. They are monitoring less the content that they did only a couple of months ago, which is deeply disturbing, actually. And we also have to bear in mind that these companies are financed by advertisement. So they are sort of in the hands of the advertisers, which means that we cannot control what sort of advertising we get. Again, to come back to the issue of echo chambers and transparency. And you mentioned, I think maybe that's the next topic to discuss, but you mentioned diversity in technology, Ida, which is very important from how you develop and use and to see the outcome of technology, but we might come back to that later.
Yes, so we are really nicely actually transitioning into the next topic, that is governance, regulation and values, because we can see that AI is being governed and regulated across Europe in very different ways. So in many parts of Europe, teachers and schools are largely left to themselves to decide how to incorporate AI in education. And Norway, I would say, is amongst those countries that are taking, for now, a pretty hands-off approach, at least nationally. So what challenges or opportunities arises when there is little national guidance or government oversight, and what should we have of these guidelines, if any?
Well, I think first and foremost, what challenges or opportunities arise? The challenge of children's privacy is first and foremost, as a supplier of educational tools, that is my first commandment to speak. I create a product for children that they cannot choose to not be a part of. So it's my responsibility as a product developer to make sure that the digital space is safe. And when you talk about all of the different suppliers that supply schools and education today, why I mentioned whether or not you have a tool that is designed for the classroom or not, this is part of it. Is it designed to withhold and respect the privacy of somebody under 18, somebody as low in age as 6 years, or is it not? So I think first and foremost, that is the challenge. That is always going to be the challenge, and that is something we never can stop to talk about, even though in Norway we've talked about this for 20 years already. But we've already gotten started because we see the examples of it being forgotten or disrespected on almost a daily basis still. So we can't stop talking about it.
Yes, Bjørn Erik.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm a little in and out here. There is some problems with my whatever, my mic. So I hope you can hear me. I switched to another microphone, but hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, thank you. So, but well, I don't know how the right word in English is, but metodefrihet, freedom of method, or teaching methods, or something like this. Yeah. Which is very important, of course. But when it comes to using technology or digital teaching aids and so on and so forth, it's not that. It can be quite problematic. And I would like to mention an example to you that I know that you know a little bit about, Arnfinn, because you worked with the Kikora, and that is digital teaching aids. That is not universally designed, so they cannot be used by blind children. Others can't be used by children with hearing problems. people with dyslexia, and we can mention also other examples. It's not maybe, I mean, it's not necessarily relevant, the things that I mentioned now with artificial intelligence, but I think that we can end up in exactly the same problems when we are talking about tools using artificial intelligence. The problem here was that as a starting point, they were designed for people who could read, people who could hear, people who had no disabilities whatsoever. And it ended up in a situation where not that many, but quite a few pupils could not understand what was going on in the classroom, which is, of course, a very big problem. And for each and every school to decide which teaching aids should they use, which one has a universal design, is almost impossible because they don't have the competence. Next level could be, could the municipality, which is legally, you know, they have the legal responsibility for what's happening in the schools in the municipality, could they be responsible? Legally, yes, but then at the end of the day, they don't have the competence either. Maybe they have it in Bergen or Oslo or some of the big cities, probably not even there, but in the smaller municipalities, for instance, where I have my summer house with 800 inhabitants, they have no chance of doing any sort of assessment whether this is universally designed or not. And it's exactly the same situation that occurs when you talk about data protection and security and data protection in teaching tools. It's not impossible for the schools or the municipality to actually make an assessment or an evaluation whether this is compliant with the regulation or not. So we really need more standards, and we need much more guidance. And it's also you know, it's misuse of resources that each and every municipality should do this by themselves. It's much better that they do it together, or for instance that the directors of education and someone else is trying to do this for them. So our situation, our main aim is to have some sort of a catalog or a Spotify or a web store or something, no, sorry, an app store or something for teachers where they can pick the teaching tools that is universal designed, and to add also compliant with data protection regulation. Because we have supervisory bodies, we can be that to some extent. The Data Protection Authority can be to some extent. The Director of Education can be to some extent, but we are not harmonized either. So we actually have a big problem both in terms of developing this sort of technology so that it is compliant with regulation, and of course that the oversight bodies are working smart and together.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you're bringing that up, Jan Erik. I was actually thinking some of the things. We've had a lot of different education ministers over the last year. Some have been done something, some have done nothing. Well, nothing is the wrong word, but at least they're not as visible as the others. And I actually like it when our educational ministers is a little bit strict. When they are saying, well, maybe we should do this, maybe we should that. I don't always agree with what they are saying, but just the fact that someone is taking a lead is a good thing in a lot of these cases. So I would say that I personally agree very much with the sentiment that there should be more national guidelines for a lot of the things we are doing now, because like you say, AI or digitalization in general are so big topics that it's especially the smaller communes doesn't really stand a chance to evaluate and to look at all these things. One example for me was when they were talking about blacklists and whitelists. And we can have a discussion about whether that is a good thing or a bad thing and all that. But the fact that we are saying that, yes, we should have blacklists, we should have whitelists, but there are no examples of these for that little commune with 800 inhabitants that they could implement in their schools next week, where they're just saying, well, everyone should make one. And like you say, that seems like a very big waste of energy because you have 300 plus counties around that will be working on their own lists instead of pooling the resources and getting up at least a minimum standard then. Yes,
and if I could just briefly add to it, because the digitalization in school, at least the way it looks from my perspective, it went very, very fast. And suddenly everyone was using iPads or Chromebooks, and we sort of entered into that situation without thinking. We didn't think enough about it, I believe. Not in terms of universal design, not in terms of outcome of education, even though that's not my topic, and when it comes to privacy as well. So it went too fast. We became too enthusiastic about it, and it came with the price. It came with the price tag.
Yeah, if I can add something in here. So when it comes to compliance, which has been my main field for the past 4 years, privacy, GDPR, the Association of Norwegian Municipalities, KS, have done a massive work on this privacy issue and done exactly what you suggest here, Ole, pooled the resources of the municipalities. And they have a project called Skolesek, which is school security, where they make templates on data protection agreements, on DPIAs, on risk assessments. But they not only make the document templates, so the municipalities don't have to make their own, which, depending on their competence, can be of differing quality. But they also have webinars and trainings and FAQs that explain the different parts of each document and template. And at the moment, I think they're working on a data privacy impact assessment, a DPIA for, I think it's Microsoft now. They finished Google, and they finished LearnLab, which is another big tech provider to schools. And they're just going through some of the really big providers because they are a lot more complex to assess. And going through this for a small municipality makes everything much easier and really holds their hand. And even if they don't have the competence necessarily themselves, then using these templates and going through this training and doing the impact assessments with the municipality association, that really raises the level of compliance and privacy and protection for kids in school. So that's a great thing, and one could suggest that someone pools their resources and does the same with AI and with learning software. And this is compliance, of course, and privacy. But you can do the same with discrimination and accessibility and other things. Yeah.
If I can, I want to. We've been up here for some time now. We've talked about, because there's 3 levels here. I do agree with Bjørn Erik. We need to have, like, the national focus needs to be there, but I've been in this sector for 10 years now, and things move slow. It's just how it is. And Norway is a small country. We are very much digitized, but at the same time, these are processes that are huge, and it takes time. And pooling resources across municipalities is something that is time consuming. So just to kind of take it down to the classroom again, we're talking about AI, we're talking about LLMs. This is happening today. Norway are not going to see some national guidelines, some DPIAs on this for some years, but the teachers today are already having on a daily basis to make choices based on how do we include or not include this technology in our classroom in the daily basis. So they're put in an impossible situation because they don't have the mandate to introduce it, the digital tools, without the necessary paperwork, which will be the data processing agreement and the risk assessments. That's the responsibility of the school owner. So the school owner needs to be aware of this and needs to be able to help the teachers and be aware of the conundrum they're currently in. And at the same time, it's naive to think that the students aren't using LLMs on their spare time with their schoolwork already, even though the teacher hasn't introduced them. They're curious people. This is a huge progress in technology development. Of course, they're going to use it. So what do you do as a teacher? Do you close the door and just say, not in my classroom? Or do you bridge the gap between the classroom and the home and say, okay, we need to do something? That is the current question that every teacher in a country where mobile phones are in the hands of the students that you have in your classroom, that is the conundrum you're currently in. So even though we have to work on a national level, at least make the school owners aware and responsible, aware of the responsibility they have about bridging or creating a safe space for these exploration to take place. At least help the students learn how and when to use this tool, so we don't have a lot of bad usage of LLMs where we think it's the go-to knowledge oracle for everything when it's actually just a statistics server.
Yeah, and I love that you took that, Ida, because that was our next topic, AI in the classroom.
I bridged that gap as
well. Where we do ask some of the things that you asked, but also what does effective and safe teaching look like with AI in the classroom today, when we know that there isn't that much governance, and we know that our students are using it, and we know that a lot of teachers are trying to experiment with it, and they're unsure of what can they do, what can they not do. A lot of good examples of great AI use, but also a lot of examples where no one is looking at the AI in the schools. So yeah, keep on the thought that Ida started there.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that we actually do have several municipalities, quite a few now, that are dealing with this issue and creating privacy-safe AI solutions for the students. Oslo municipality has been one of the front runners here, as well as Randaberg in the southwest of Norway. But there are many other municipalities that are copying their models, and also others making their own models of this interaction between students and LLMs, and doing it in a way that's legal, where the privacy of the students are let's say sufficiently intact.
Yep.
So it is good to note that we are working in Norway in ways that are compliant with the legal demands in the classroom. But it is also important to note that, like, technically, if you don't have a municipality that has this in order and that builds these guardrails around their students to interact with an LLM, if you are using an LLM in the classroom and you don't have this in place, that's like borderline illegal or actually illegal. So even if the students are using the LLMs on their phones, on their private devices, if you're using it, there are a lot of ways to get into trouble with that. If the data protection authority comes looking, so be careful with that.
Björn Erik will pop up on your screen.
No, I was just smiling.
Yeah.
and a smile saying that I'm a bit happy that I'm not working with data protection anymore.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. What a hornet's nest that just became. Well, I was working as a teacher just as it started, like when ChatGPT 3 was released and DALL-E 1 was released. And at that point, you sort of got zombies from the pictures, and they had all sorts of mutations, and the GPT weren't all that good. So I think I saw what was coming. So I did use it with my students, but what I did was take it up on the screen in the classroom, and we played around with it there. So my data was going everywhere, but the students' data were not. So I think there are probably ways around all this, but you have to be very conscious on how you do it and what you work with, and not least what you tell your students. Because like you say, Arnfinn, most of them, if not all of them, probably have an LLM on their computer or their phone already. And if you are making assignments where you are assuming that they need to use them, you should also be a little bit careful if your county or community doesn't actually have an LLM for them to use, because you have kind of pushed them in a direction, whether knowingly or not, where they shouldn't really be. Like you say, Arnfinn, for legal reasons, and where do their data go, and what is, and how does this all go into pricing models, things like that? Where are we?
But at the same time, this is not AI LLM specific. This is digital tools. This is data storage, data collection. It's the same as it's always been. So this is not new. I think across Europe, this looks different in every country, but we do all subscribe to the same law. So how far each country has come with finding the solution that fits their educational system, that's one thing. But when it comes to, if we kind of say that, okay, the privacy issue is something that we've discussed. What does effective and safe teaching, is what you've asked, look like when AI is part of the classroom? I think understanding the tool first and foremost is something that you need to spend time on, and how you do that, if you educate yourself as a teacher, if you take courses or just familiarize yourself through uses, that's for sure something you need to do, and also understand that as everything else in a learning design, in a course, in a lesson, it's a tool. It's a tool that has a role in the learning process that you're trying to facilitate. So you need to understand what this tool is and where it's strong and where it's less useful. And I wanted to provide one example of what changes in the classroom when we have something like ChatGPT or other LLMs available in the classroom or outside of the classroom. Traditionally, when we go into a new topic, we do traditional informational searches. It started with the school library. We had several books on a topic. You looked into the books and you got some curated information. Then internet hit and we moved our search. We did a hybrid. We did some informational search in the curated books that we have. Then we went to the internet to get a full view of the informational diversity that existed, and also the diversity of opinions that exists on one topic. And that is important in the learning process, because you need to identify the difference of opinion. You need to understand who are the ones that subscribe and to that share these differences of opinion. And when you do a Google search today, you can say what you want with Google, but they tell you that I know that there are millions of different opinions in this within this topic. So the diversity is huge. When I ask ChatGPT about the same, I get one answer. And yes, it is politically correct, and it's formatted as on this side and on this side, this is what you get. But everything in between, it just disappears. And who is the one that subscribes to side A of the topic and side B? They're completely faceless. So you don't understand who is the sender of this opinion. You know there is somebody that has this opinion, and there is somebody that has a difference of opinion. You don't know who they are, and you don't know how the weighing, how many on each side. And everything's a spectrum these days, but you only get the black and white from ChatGPT. So it's an either or, and we lose something that is very much important. So do not use LLMs as a informational or a replacement for the informational search. Make sure that the students reflect upon this instead of just make this efficient, because there's some you lose something in the process. So that was just one example on the go on like what is the differences and what are the possibilities that might seem clever, but maybe you lose something or a lot in the process.
And one thing I was thinking a little bit about as well around that, Ida, is that in our classrooms today we have very diverse students, and they will often search in their own language. And so the bias that you get from searching in Norwegian or the answer you get might actually be fundamentally different if you search in an African language or an Arab language or Russian for that matter. And that would also color what you get back in the classroom. So that is also one of those things where I'm worrying a little bit about the bias and what kind of story are you told. I asked the same question as you, Arnfinn, but where we're talking the different languages. So the answer we get might be different. And I think there are some big pits in that as well.
Yeah, just to briefly add to that, the LLMs will generally hallucinate more in where their training data is thin. So if you ask them questions about, and now the LLMs that we use generally are based in the United States or maybe Europe. And so if you ask them questions about Africa or Southeast Asia or something like that, they will hallucinate more and be less correct and factual. But they won't tell you that they don't know. They'll just make something up.
Yeah.
Well, I just a little bit on the side, but still relevant, I hope, for this topic, because we are talking about diversity, and that Norway is a diverse country, and sometimes we sort of assume that everyone and all young people today are very digital and know not about technology, but that is actually not true. Resources, class background, education of parents plays an important role also when it comes to technological knowledge. And we also have to bear in mind that you're calculating that between 15 and 17% of the population have some sort of disability. If quite a few of them, most of them are not visible. And this can be either language or it can be hearing, as we talked about. It can be the way to move around, a lot of different things. And it's not always that pupils would like to talk about it either, because they don't want to have this stigma on them, right? And I think it's very important to bear this in mind when you are talking about technology and digitalization and artificial intelligence. And that brings me back to my first point, actually, regarding the teaching aids. and whether they are universally designed or not, which I think is something that would be even more important as the time go by, because we will lose a big percentage of the population if we are not taking this into account. So we have developed something that we call the inclusion by design, which is built on the principle of data protection by design, as you might be aware about. So the way of thinking is that you should, in data protection by design, is that you should think about data protection from the very beginning of a design product when you're talking user interface or whatever. And the little brother or little sister is diversity by design. So you should think about inclusion, think about universal design from the very beginning of the development process. I think it's always also it's put a lot of obligation on the teachers to really understand this and to really take this into account. And it's not that easy for a school. I understand this very well, because the teacher is there to teach, but the teacher also have to take into account universal design, disability, data protection impact assessment, a lot of other things, which makes it quite difficult. So this is probably the last things that time allows me to say, but we need, we can't, I mean, it's important that the government and the Directorate of Education take a leading role. But that's also Anfinn and Ida have mentioned. We have to build more competence within the schools and with each and every teacher, so that they know how to cope with this, even though they are not legally responsible for it. But because if something goes wrong, it's the municipality who is in charge and who should take the blame or pay the fine or whatever. But the teachers has to be, they need to build competence on this area as well.
Great, thank you, Bjørn Erik. We are really closing in on the end of this. We do have one question and we have like 2 minutes left. So when an LMS company chooses an AI company to collaborate with regarding educational content, how accountable for that choice should the LMS company be? Should that be a choice regulated by the government, or maybe the government should come up with a list over AI that could be trusted? That's one of those hard, simple questions that are both simple to answer and hard to answer.
I think it's a great question.
It is a very good question.
I can try and answer it as a supplier of products. We use several sub-processors, which would be the case here. Companies you collaborate with. There are two ways to go about this. You create a generic use of a sub-processor. One example of this would be where is your data stored? You can use Microsoft, you can use Amazon, you can use Google to store your user data today. That is a risk assessment that we do as a supplier, but we also invite our customers, which would be the schools, to have opinions on this. And if there are any strong opinions on whether or not one or the other sub-supplier should be used, we listen to them. But most likely, it's just the criteria of what should be taken care of and what do we need to make sure we're still keeping safe, or how we keep it safe. That is the important part for the schools. So I do believe both of them can be done if you just you don't marry, you just subscribe to a service as a product developer, and that I think is the, call it the modern way of doing something. So you can actually change the supplier of the AI if needed. You don't intertwine it into your product, you connect to it, and you can disconnect to it and replace it at some point. So I think that is something. This is questions you should ask your LLM for sure. How have you integrated?
Have spent our hour. That went really fast, and I would really like to thank all of you for participating in this. I hope our viewers got a lot out of it, even if we were just talking and discussing these topics. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. There will be a webinar on AI literacy from It's Learning later, and you will get a link for it when we're sending out the recording of this webinar. So I wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for participating. And that was it from us today.
Thank you.